He wrote her a card, I think it was a birthday card, and said, by the way, I just got married.
I just curled up in a fetal position on my floor and was just crying and sobbing. And that was...
And that was the time where everything began?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I was so unhappy with myself, that if I was a different person, that I would be the one that was married to him.
And the therapist didn't even know about that. I mean, this is one of the most traumatic events in a young woman's life, and she didn't seem to know about that, and other things.
Like what?
Well, her problems with speech dysfunction. I had problems when I was a kid, and I know what it's like.
I stuttered since I was 2, 3 years old, and I was a severe stutterer as a child, and I was made fun of constantly. I mean, I would have incredible fear getting up for speeches, a lot of different things. I had fear going to school because I was made fun of incredibly, ostracized.
She didn't get medical records or school records. She didn't ask for a family history, which would have disclosed to her the fact that there was depression and speech dysfunction in our families. It didn't have to come from sexual abuse.
So my next session with her, she told me that my father came in, and she said to me he was very sincere. I don't know if he did it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt so betrayed by her that she would have me do something so severe and not be sure of it herself. But I had committed myself to something so radical, you know, when I wrote to him. How could I be wrong about something like this? I went too far. He'll never forgive me now.
He did forgive her. By then, he said, he understood.
I saw a program on local television, and there was a man reading a letter. It was me. It was me and my daughter's letter. I got the 800 number, and I called the foundation immediately, and someone called me back the next day, and they knew exactly what I was saying. I mean, I wasn't alone. It was a whole mess of people out there going through this, I discovered.
Good morning, FMS Foundation.
The False Memory Syndrome Foundation in Philadelphia, which was founded in 1992, now counts over 15,000 families as members. It is staffed mostly by relatives of adult children who have made accusations of recovered memories of incest.
I'm one of 6 children, and 3.5 years ago, my sister accused my parents of sexually abusing her from 6 months of age to 12 years old. And she has repressed memories that just came about in the last 3 years, and she thinks that the other 5 of us are in denial.
So at first, as I understand, my granddaughter didn't recall anything, but later she came to the conclusion that I was the one that had molested her.
She called one night around midnight or 12:30 and made her accusation. She had finally remembered what was troubling her and who it was. Prior to that, she was searching for every uncle, both sides. We have a very large family, all of our close friends. You know, the search was over. She had decided it was her father.
She has vague memories of a room with striped wallpaper, which is in fact the room that I'd fixed up where she was when she was a small girl. She has those kinds of vague memories of the room and those kind of things, but there's nothing at all specific about the incident.
My mother later said that they felt like the universe, they were little worms on the universe. Their whole world just shattered. They were completely and utterly horrified by this letter written by their daughter, who they love very much.
What she usually does is to make a copy, and then she highlights them for me. So,
Pamela Fried is the director of the foundation and is its public voice.
I think I can speak for the more than 13,000 families who've contacted us and say that, in our country, every person has a right to be able to defend himself or herself, to be able to have an accusation that is hurled at them in this way, to have it examined by somebody, by some organization, by some person. And the tragedy, the events that have propelled the formation of the foundation is the fact that people were accused and there was absolutely nowhere that they could turn to have their side of the story heard.
It's such a disgrace, and you're so ashamed to think that your reputation has been sallied so badly. And we have a very large family, and she went to all of her, in the process of remembering, she went to all her aunts and uncles and her cousins, spoke to everyone. So it wasn't a secret at all.
Okay, now this is the one.
Oh, that's the one we probably have to use for the legal, the legal file.
My daughter read a statement. She said, I will no longer keep our little secret, you know, indicating that it was a secret. Way back when she was small, I had molested her. So she read the statement, and I said to her, before God, this is not true what you're saying. And then they just left.
My child is lost. And she needs help. And I feel powerless to be able to help her. And I write her notes, you know, and cards from time to time at Christmas, birthdays, Easter, notes, letters, and it's only been in the last month or so that I've gotten any kind of a formal response back from her, and that was the message basically was don't try to see me, don't try to call me, respect my boundaries.
On that issue, because I find myself dreaming about my father quite a bit and trying to make sense of some of those dreams.
David Kaloff, a therapist and survivor advocate in Seattle, is unimpressed by the family's sentiments.
Every sexual offender who's in prison today has given their earnest denial that what they did didn't happen or it wasn't as bad as everybody thought. Sexual offenders have the capacity to turn the tables, to make it seem as if they're the victims and their victims are the perpetrators. This is well documented in this field. So you have to be careful. And I'm not saying that everybody you talk to who was accused is guilty, but what I am saying is that for those that are, they're masters at manipulation.
I think that there's a very small percentage of people in the FMS who absolutely did not in any way abuse their children. I think the number is likely to be very small. What we know about perpetrators is that on the whole, perpetrators start out by saying, I didn't do it.
My feeling about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation basically is that it was, and it's tragic, let me say this too, is that basically it was one family's dispute about alleged incest in that family that was unresolved and now is replicated in the culture.
That family, whose dispute is well known within the therapeutic community, is the Fried family.
It's widely known that my parents claim to be falsely accused of sexual abuse by their daughter. I'm a scientist whose empirical work has been replicated in laboratories around this country and Europe, and until the last few years of parental invasion, I enjoyed an excellent professional reputation without any scandal attached to my name. Is it because I have a questionable...
In 1993, in front of an audience of about 250 mental health professionals, Jennifer Fried, PhD in psychology, ended a professional speech with private comments, telling of the memories that she had recovered, memories of sexual abuse by her father.
Medical clinic. At times I'm flabbergasted that my memory is considered false and my alcoholic father's memory is considered rational and sane.
Her father, Peter Fried, is a professor of mathematics.
It started for us the morning of, I think it was a Thursday morning, when we had arrived the day before at our daughter's place in Eugene, Oregon. She and her children and husband left early that morning with the story that they needed to go to the doctor for an ear infection in one of the children. And a couple of hours later, we were summoned to the phone, and her husband told us that we were to leave Eugene, that they had booked flights for us on an airplane, and that Jennifer now remembered having been seriously abused by me as a child. It was quite an experience to get a phone call like that.
Peter and Pamela Fried met when they were children. They became stepbrother and sister when Pam's mother married Peter's father. They fell in love. Pamela was 18 when she married Peter. He was 19. Jennifer was born a year later, and her sister Gwen 6 years after that. Pamela and Peter settled down to raise their family and studied for their PhDs. Peter in mathematics, Pam in education. Jennifer followed in her parents' footsteps. By the time she had her first child, she also had a PhD in psychology. Pam and Peter were grandparents for the second time when Jennifer, who had just begun therapy, recovered her first memories of abuse.
Although I don't want to discuss the details of my recovered memories, I do need to clarify that my family of origin was troubled in many observable ways.
Her father was an alcoholic, she said. She talked of objectionable patterns of behavior.
A pattern of boundary violation, a pattern of invasion and control, a pattern of inappropriate and unwanted sexualization, a pattern...
Peter does not dismiss his daughter's charges lightly.
I'm sure that in each case, not in each case, but in each case, there's some aspect of what she's saying is true. I became a serious alcoholic in the later 70s and went to a dry cleaners, as it were, and haven't been drinking since. My humor was ribald at times, always has been. I was influenced by this idea that one should be open and should see sex as something that a healthy part of life, and therefore it's something that a child shouldn't have to hide from a parent. This may be wrong. I'm sure that there are all sorts of things that I did that I wouldn't do again. Presumably one learns as time goes on. But there's nothing that I did that comes close to warranting an accusation of sexual abuse. That's totally off the wall.
I remember dancing nude in front of my father with a friend when we were each 9 or 10 years old. We were decorated as Playboy bunnies. I remember my father communicating approval of the nude dancing. He does not deny this for claim.
Dr. Timon Sirmak, a psychiatrist in San Francisco, California, works with children of alcoholics and has been dealing with the problems of disconnected families.
You've just hit on one of the most difficult parts of this to discuss. Is it possible that an event happened and from the parent's perspective, they both can acknowledge the same event, but from the parent's perspective, it is not seen as sexual abuse. They didn't go into it with the motive of it being sexual abuse. They may come from a culture or a family which has a whole different meaning for that. But the child is growing up in a different culture and at a different time and perceives it as being abusive. Absolutely that can happen. And that kind of thing can lead to a gulf between the two generations, which is very difficult to span.
Denial of child sexual abuse is as old as child sexual abuse. For my parents' sake, I hope they can find a way to look inward, to do their own healing instead of waging a war at the national level.
If we had been talking with our daughter, if we had had an opportunity to talk with anybody, there would be no reason in this world why anybody would ever let even their next door neighbor know that something like this had happened in their family. The 13,000 families that have called us don't call because of the accusation. I mean, that's a part of it. But they call because there is no place where they can go to talk about it.
Well, welcome back. Dr. Pamela Fried is Executive Director of False Memory Syndrome Foundation of Philadelphia. Good morning, Dr. Fried.
Good morning.
Under Pamela's directorship, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation has received a great deal of media attention and has become a focal point in a heated national debate.
Well, I think I've heard two stories of parents that match the more than 13,000 reports that have been received by the foundation of an adult.
She sees it not only as a support group, but as a research organization disseminating information about false memories which have been encouraged by bad therapists.
It's been in the patterns of so many thousands of reports that alarm has been built in the therapeutic community. And
her critics see it as an organization of perpetrators harassing therapists while hiding behind a facade of scientific research.
The interpretation of dreams.
I believe it's an advocacy organization for accused perpetrators, basically. I think there has been an effort to use scientific data and scientific experts to lend a cloak of respectability to an organization, an advocacy organization, that in that process scientific data have been misrepresented and inaccurately represented. And I also think that the kind of aggressive harassment of therapists that is advocated by the FMS Foundation is unconscionable.